going to have to be measured in how I talk about this because I am perceived by some as being an ACC homer. And that's fine. Whatever. We're an ACC country, so I'm not going to get too caught up in that. But I do like to think of myself as somebody as objective as possible when it comes to this stuff and tries to have a better understanding as to why things are the way that they are, okay? So let's start with the perception of the ACC. The ACC, by metrics, by numbers, by hard facts, is down. They're not one of the best conferences in the country. You cannot argue this point. There is no context to be added. Simple as that. That being said, we were in this position last year, and we know how the rest played out in March. You had 3 teams in the Elite Eight, 2 teams in the Final Four, 1 team in the final. And as much as I like to make fun of Jim Boeheim, he was right earlier this year when he talked about you can talk all you want about the regular season if you're the Big 10 or the Big 12 or the SEC. What do you do in March? That's what the NCAA tournament is about. That's what college basketball is about. What do you do in March? And consistently, the ACC is the team that does well in March. But there's other issues here. There's the simple answer, win more. But there's also a shift in how the ACC is being perceived for obvious reasons. Coach K just retired, so there goes credibility, so to speak. There goes something that you can look at and go, yep, there's the Hall of Famer. I trust in that guy. Same with Roy Williams. There has been a exodus of Hall of Fame coaches that had filled the ACC up, and we're left with good coaches and guys we don't know anything about yet because they literally just got started. And then the one Hall of Fame coach that's remaining, Jim Boeheim, is kind of an ass.
Hey, cranky old man.
He needs to take a nap, straight up, all right? And this is something that Jeff Capel, Pitt's head coach, talked about during the ACC conference call on Monday when he talked about the shifting nature of the ACC and why things are looked at the way that they are. And it's a very simple thing. The coaches are gone.
I don't really understand it, to be completely honest with you. I don't know if that, Coach Smith, Coach K, Coach Williams, I don't know if it's because they're not here anymore. So the national reputation of that, Coach Pitino, same thing. But I don't really get it. When you look at the success that we've had in the NCAA tournament, when you look at the success we've had in the ACC Big Ten Challenge, if you look at what our guys have done nationally, as far as coaching, as far as players, as far as talent, as far as draft picks, all of those things, it's more than anyone. And so I've never really understood it. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
That's Jeff Capel, Pitt head coach, on Monday during the ACC coaches teleconference on kind of trying to answer his own question. I don't get it, but here's what I think it is. And I think he's right. It ultimately comes down to all the coaches that we knew and loved that had won national championships, they're not here anymore. And it's not happening at the schools like Miami or NC State, for that matter, being good this year. Those are not the kind of schools that the national media looks towards as a bellwether as to whether or not the ACC is good. This is the equivalent of SEC football. If Alabama and Georgia are not good in football, well, then the perception of the SEC is going to drop off a little bit. I mean, it's as simple as that. So Duke and Carolina being a transitionary period with John Shire and Hubert Davis has a lot to do with it. But Capel took it a step further. To use the SEC analogy, when I watch the SEC Network or I hear any SEC people talking about football, they're usually pumping up the league. The ACC is not like the SEC. I think that's a feature of the ACC. I think that actually is our personality as people who watch ACC basketball, not to be shills for the conference. But Capel had issues with the ACC Network.
I don't think it helps when we, have our own network. And there I was watching when we were at Virginia Tech the night before, I'm watching our own network. And one of the first questions that comes up is it perception or reality that the ACC is down? And I never see that on the Big Ten Network. Yeah. I watch the Big Ten Network a lot because one of my best friends is coaches in that league, and so I'm watching them. And, man, they are always pumping the Big Ten, always. And I think it's a really good league. But I think ours is too. And I wish the people that represent us would have the respect and pump our league and be positive instead of looking at negative things.
So that's Jeff Capel, Pitt head coach, on Monday during the ACC teleconference. And I'll respectfully disagree with Capel on that front. I don't want the ACC to be like the Big Ten or the SEC when it becomes a shill for the conference. That's not what makes the league. The league has its own standard when it comes to basketball, and if they feel, or if we feel, that the ACC is not up to that standard, well, then I think it's perfectly okay to call that out, to say this is not an ACC vintage season. That is okay. I'm not going to put, and others should not put, their credibility on the line just for the sake of the ACC. ACC ain't paying my bills. Capital Broadcasting's paying my bills. So unless I'm getting a check from Jim Phillips, I'm really not all that concerned as to whether or not the ACC feels good about what I have to say about it. And others shouldn't have to worry about that either, even as a league partner. Which gets us to, and I say, like, we're technically a corporate partner with NC State and Duke, okay? Capital Broadcasting, we carry their games. But that doesn't matter because we will still have the credibility to talk about these teams as objectively as we can. And there's been some pushback about Jim Phillips, ACC commissioner, and whether or not he should kind of be out there saber-rattling on the ACC's behalf. And I'm thinking to myself, what is that going to accomplish? What is Jim Phillips, who doesn't really know much about the ACC in general, he's still learning the ins and outs of the league, what is that going to do? But I will say this. There is one criticism of Jim Phillips, and one that I've experienced myself, that John Swofford, the previous commissioner, was really, really good at. That was building consensus, building relationships within the footprint of the ACC and those who cover the league. And if you feel like you have a good relationship with the league, well, then you're more likely to talk about the league in the way that you would want them to, right? I'm not saying shill, but at least be out there arguing on behalf of the ACC with the right context for these conversations. Jim Phillips, in my estimation, in my own experience, has not done a good job of that because the ACC was built largely on blocks of media on the local level. Now, I have to be realistic about where the media is these days. The days of large North Carolina newspapers and TV outlets and radio outlets is gone. Every time I go to a press room, it's diminished by the numbers every single season. Okay? And the same with Virginia. North Carolina and Virginia under John Swofford were usually setting the tone for conversations about basketball along with the ACC being really, really good. That doesn't exist anymore. And then, okay, well, what about the ACC Network? Well, slight problem. The ACC Network is simply the ACC Network shows you where college basketball ranks with ESPN in terms of priorities. To say that it's checking a box is probably too crass, but I can tell you, based on the production value, who they assign to games, how they talk about these things, that college basketball in general, not just the ACC, but in general, is not a priority for ESPN. And when it's not your priority, well, the way in which your league is talked and the people you hire to talk about your league is going to be reflected by that, okay? So that's just the reality of the business. But there is one thing that I think can change, and this gets back to the coaches, all right? So the Hall of Fame coaches have all left, and the ones that are remaining aren't as, shall we say, media savvy as the ones who left. I mentioned Jim Boeheim. He's cranky. He needs a nap. But you also got Tony Bennett. Tony Bennett's won a national championship. Tony Bennett is well respected, but Tony Bennett has zero interest in playing the media game. And I felt like Steve Forbes, Wake Forest head coach, was channeling me last night at PNC Arena when he said this about other coaches talking up the league the same way that Coach K used to before he retired.
Maybe we need to do a better job of talking about our league as coaches. I think we should all be supporting each other. I'm so happy for Kevin. Man, he turned the state. He came in here and won last year, and we got him at our place, but he came in and swept us. And I know he was feeling some heat. He's doing a hell of a job. Just like John Shire is doing a hell of a job following a legend. It'd be like following John Wooden. Would you want to do that? Gene Bartow lasted 2 years doing that. And then he went to UAB and started a program, okay? I think he lost 2 games, too. I don't know, man. I just think We got a great product. We've had some Hall of Fame coaches retire. Two guys on Mount Rushmore. There's going to be a little bit of that, but it can't be me, and it can't be Mike Young. So it's got to be some of these other guys that have accomplished a lot in this league. I'm just trying to get our program back to being competitive and respectful.
I'm not going to I'm not going to speculate as to what Steve Forbes was getting at, but I'll just go ahead and say it for him instead. He needs accomplished coaches to promote the league, not go and whine to reporters about who bought what teams, i.e. Jim Boeheim. More of promotion, less of whining, and maybe the ACC gets talked about a little bit differently. Of course, the easiest answer here is win, which the ACC can do potentially again in March. And obviously we'll talk about the league wholly different if they have another successful March run in the next couple of weeks.